I'm going to say a word which is arguably one of the most decisive ones in politics. When I say this word, I want you to think about what images are conjured up in your mind. When I say it, I want you to think about what political organisations conduct or have conducted themselves under the banner and in the name of this word. This word is nationalism. What immediately has come to your mind? What sights, sounds, which people, which places? Did you think of something perhaps like this? Or perhaps something more contemporary, like this.
I'm going on a march because I want Britain to be back British. I want Britain to be back British. We've got interracial law and the Muslimic infidel. They're trying to get their law over our country. And it is happening. It's happening in other countries. Everything, it's happening in every country. It's like...
In my previous video, I refuted an anti-DPRK article. In the article, the author criticised the DPRK for supposedly being racist. In the refutation, I touched upon the DPRK's stance towards nationalism and nationalism as a whole. To begin with, I'll discuss these points again. Now, nobody in their right mind would argue that those people in the two clips I have shown weren't acting under the banner or in the name of nationalism. However, we cannot approach nationalism from one side, much like other socio-political tools. Approaching the question of nationalism from one side will fail to provide an accurate analysis of its function. To give a different example, and again something I discussed in my previous video, the state is not a black and white entity. One of the ultimate goals of communism is the abolition of the state. The state machinery, however, continues to exist under socialism. The question of the state was not approached by one side, by Marxist-Leninists. The state as it exists in capitalism is under the control of the bourgeois exploiting classes. Would we so blindly assume that the existence of the state under socialism also serves the bourgeoisie? Of course not. The state serves the role as the special coercive force, the repression of one class over another. In the case of socialism, the state is under the control of the working classes and represses the bourgeoisie. In capitalism, the opposite is true. Therefore, it is clear that the existence and function of the state can take different forms: the bourgeois state and the proletarian state. This is basic Marxist-Leninist theory. So then how does this relate to nationalism? Mainly because I am strongly of the opinion that nationalism can be considered in such a way. The existence of nationalism can take different forms: bourgeois nationalism and proletarian nationalism. Nationalism can exist both under socialism and capitalism. However, the way this phenomenon manifests itself fundamentally depends upon in which system it exists. Bourgeois nationalism is the form of nationalism which those in the previous two clips conducted their activities. The Nazis, under the pretext of upholding their nation, did nothing more than serve the capitalist classes. Their bourgeois nationalism led them to the privatization of industry, outlawing of trade unions, and the rounding up and execution of left-wing sympathizers and Communist Party members. All these actions did not uphold the rights or interests of the German popular masses, but instead upheld the so-called rights and interests of the German capitalists. From a Juche point of view, the Nazis trampled upon the independence of the popular masses, denying their rights to class and national emancipation. Bourgeois nationalism, therefore, is the veiling of class interests by the capitalists in the guise of national interests. Because of this veiling, bourgeois nationalism will always be nationally chauvinistic, egotistical, and exclusive, as it reflects the chauvinistic, egotistical, and exclusive nature of the capitalist class. The chauvinistic, egotistical, and exclusive nature of bourgeois nationalism usually takes the form of racism and racial supremacy, the belief of the existence of a higher and lower race based upon an unscientific understanding of humanity. Racism is therefore heavily associated with nationalism within the mainstream political discourse. In the case of bourgeois nationalism, this is true. However, within the mainstream, the understanding of nationalism is only in reference to bourgeois nationalism. Whenever a mainstream news agency attempts to define the Juche idea, it's frequently described as a merging of Marxism-Leninism, nationalism, and spirituality. Of course, to the layman, the use of the word nationalism will of course make the vast majority of people associate the Juche idea to nationalist Nazism. In reality, the conflation of nationalism which existed in Nazi Germany and in the DPRK is a false one. Proletarian nationalism is fundamentally different to that of bourgeois nationalism. The most pressing issue is to discuss racism. Is racism part of proletarian nationalism? No. Kim Song-won once said, "Racism is a reactionary theory that claims national culture, national identity, and national mentality are defined by the character of a race, and that social inequality is based on a race's hereditary." Furthermore, Kim Jong-il said in Let Us Develop the Korean Nation First doctrine, "We do not assert that the Koreans' biological constitution is more developed than those of other races. Defining the superiority of a nation according to biological or ethnic characteristics is the practice of reactionary bourgeois ethnology. Arguing that national characteristics are defined by racial characteristics, bourgeois ethnologists classify people according to skin colour, namely white people as higher race and coloured people as lower race. They say that only a higher race can create advanced civilization. The reactionary ethnological doctrine has been used by imperialists as an ideological instrument for their policy of racial discrimination and obliteration of nations. Imperialists still use the bourgeois ethnological doctrine as an instrument to justify their domination over other nations, to spread national nihilism, the idea of subservience to great powers, and the idea of dependence on foreign forces among the people of colonial dependent countries and the people of the third world. And to obstruct their national independence and independent development, fundamentally speaking, there can be no higher race or lower race. We cannot for a moment pretend that nationalism hasn't existed in the USSR, revolutionary Vietnam, revolutionary China, or the DPRK. But where has there been institutionalized racism? Today in Cuba and the DPRK, there is enshrined rights to give all those who live in those nations equal rights regardless of race. Also, Mao Zedong gave a speech in 1937 where he said, "Can a communist who is an internationalist at the same time be a patriot? We hold that not only can he be, but also must be." The specific content of patriotism is determined by historical conditions. There is the patriotism of the Japanese aggressors and of Hitler, and there's our patriotism. Communists must resolutely oppose the patriotism of the Japanese aggressors and of Hitler. The communists of Japan and Germany are defeatists with regard to the wars being waged by their countries. To bring about the defeat of the Japanese aggressors and of Hitler by every possible means is in the interests of the Japanese and the German people, and the more complete the defeat the better. For the wars launched by the Japanese aggressors and Hitler are harming the people at home as well as the people of the world. China's case, however, is different because she is the victim of aggression. Chinese communists must therefore combine patriotism with internationalism. We are at once internationalists and patriots, and our slogan is, "Fight to defend the motherland against the aggressors." For us, defeatism is a crime, and to strive for victory in the war of resistance is an inescapable duty. For only by fighting in defense of the motherland can we defeat the aggressors and achieve national liberation. And only by achieving national liberation will it be possible for the proletariat and other working people to achieve their own emancipation. The victory of China and the defeat of the invading imperialists will help the people of other countries. Thus, in wars of national liberation, patriotism is applied to internationalism. So, what could we consider to be the characteristics of proletarian nationalism? There are a few different lines of thought on this matter. However, I would like to propose the following understanding, which I believe to be the most accurate. Of course, nations are merely lines drawn on a map. However, we must accept that class struggle is waged within the unit of a nation. The nation unit is the vehicle in which class struggle is waged. In a fanciful world, the workers of the world would unite simultaneously and wage class struggle on a genuinely international scale. However, history has taught us that this is not a realistic expectation of the popular masses. Socialist society is based upon collectivism. All members of society must become members of the social collective, and all in all, it could be said that the nation and the social collective become indistinguishable. To be a citizen of a socialist nation is to be a member of the social collective. To not be a citizen of that nation is to not be a member of that collective. When the entirety of the nation has become a social collective, those who identify with that collective will undoubtedly identify with that nation, its characteristics and culture. All those who live in the socialist nation naturally will yearn for its independence and prosperity. If a communist is living within a socialist nation, then they will uphold, love and support the country and the classes that it represents. In having a correct understanding of nationalism, Kim Jong-il said, "I also assert, as the leader instructed, that one must be an ardent patriot, a true nationalist in order to become a genuine revolutionary, a communist. The communist who fights for the realization of the independence of the masses of the people must first of all be a true nationalist. Those who fight for their people, their country and their homeland are genuine communists, true nationalists and patriots. Those who do not love their own parents, brothers and sisters cannot love their country and compatriots. Likewise, those who do not love their homeland and people cannot become communists. We are inheriting with fidelity the great leader's noble idea of loving the country, the nation and the people, and making every effort to rally all the sections of the nation by dint of all embracing politics and lead them to the road of patriotism. To my mind, this quote sums up what I've talked about. A true communist must have boundless love and devotion to the social collective which exists within the nation unit. To reject devotion to this is to reject the socialist society, its function, its mode of production, and its social relations. Proletarian nationalism, the nationalism of a social collective, is a real phenomena. However, I'm strongly of the opinion that it tends not to be recognized due to the necessity to distance communism, quite rightly, from the commonly accepted understanding of nationalism, which is of the bourgeois reactionary nature. So, can proletarian nationalism and internationalism work together? Yes, of course. Like previously stated, we cannot ignore the fact that the revolution is carried out within the nation unit, and therefore international politics between socialist countries, and for all countries for that matter, is conducted on the basis of nations. We must not forget that between two socialist nations there exists therefore two social collectives. A member of one of those socialist nations is concerned for the development of it and has love for it. This is their nationalism, but they will also feel the need to mutually help, support and develop other social collectives, i.e. their international working class comrades. This is their internationalism. For those nations struggling against imperialist aggression in the Third World, we have to accommodate the two forms of nationalism in our understanding of their situation. Imperialism is the primary contradiction in the world today, and therefore its destruction is the most urgent objective. Historically, unity between communists and nationalists has been carried out to resolve this contradiction. Once its resolution was complete, then the second, third and fourth, and so on, contradictions were resolved. In China, the Chinese Communist Party and the Kuomintang united to drive the imperialists from their land. After this task was completed, the two factions once again split and the civil war continued. In the DPRK, Kim Il-sung united the communist and nationalist rebels and helped to elucidate the relationship between class and national interests, thus converting the bourgeois nationalists into proletarian nationalists. Therefore, we must not reject a nation's anti-imperialist struggle on the basis of its government. We must understand that their primary focus is to kick out the imperialists, and we, as communists, however, do not have to look favourably upon their bourgeois nationalistic tendencies. Once the imperialists have been defeated and the nation's sovereignty and independence restored, must the communists of that nation then wage class struggle against the national bourgeoisie and attain class emancipation. Of course, in the course of struggle against imperialism, the communists must be mobilized to take power at a moment's notice. The rejection of imperialist aggression and the victory of the communists in China and Korea happened within the blink of an eye, of course from a historical perspective. On a side note, many Third World bourgeois nationalist governments likely side with the imperialists. However, what I'm talking about in this case are those governments which may have bourgeois nationalistic tendencies but are fighting imperialism. Within the imperialist countries, am of the opinion that it is the duty of communists to denounce the bourgeois nationalists, which they rightly do. However, just denouncing them on the basis of their reactionary ideology is not enough. Communists must provide a proper explanation as to the link between bourgeois nationalism and the veiling of bourgeois interests in the interests of the nation. Failing to provide a proper explanation of bourgeois nationalism will lead to communists providing the same explanation as the liberals give. Providing the same explanation will lead to the rejection of nationalism as a whole and will likely result in the fighting of proletarian nationalism when it eventually manifests itself after the socialist revolution. Nationalism is a hot topic. Communists shouldn't necessarily enshrine proletarian nationalism into their charters, but rather we should understand the multiple ways nationalism manifests itself and must accept that proletarian nationalism does exist and must not be fought but rather accepted as a legitimate phenomena which exists in the course of socialist construction.